All right, well, normally when I stand up, certainly on this stage, we've just been worshipping the Lord, so it's a little different with the comedy. Here's what Disraeli, the 19th century British Prime Minister, said. He said, "The secret of success in life is to be ready when a man's time has come." The secret of success in life is to be ready when a man's time has come. And the truth is, you and I just don't know when that time might be. 19th century London. No proper way of dealing with effluent, so it all goes into the Thames. One particular year, it builds and it builds. The smell becomes known literally as the stink. The House of Commons, of course, right on the Thames, finds that the aroma is so intense that they can no longer meet there. They literally have to discamp, go somewhere else. It's a massive problem for this city. But one person's problem is another person's opportunity. Enter onto the stage a Victorian with the grand name of Basil Jett. Basil Jett had refined his skills of sewage and dealing with sewage over years. So he was able to build the sewage system that runs under the embankment, still runs there today, and deal with the problem of the stink. The question that I want to ask in the few minutes that I've got right now is, what are the habits that you and I need to build into our lives so that at the moment when our time comes, we're ready for it? I don't know how many of you find my experience, which is that an opportunity arises and I'm wanting to say, hang on, could I sharpen my sword, please? Anybody had that experience? And so I want to suggest 3 habits, and I want to draw them from the life of Daniel, which will help prepare us for those moments when life comes, or when opportunity comes. Daniel. We know the story of Daniel, one of the Hebrew young elite who had taken from Jerusalem by the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire, as it is expanding, needs fresh brain power, needs new energy and youth, and so they take all the young Hebrews, take them to Babylon, and start training them there. For any good Jew who emphasized holiness and separateness and distinctness with God, it would have been a shocking thing to be taken to Babylon and asked to build this empire. And right at the beginning of Daniel chapter 1, there's a hint, there's something which is just written into the first few verses, which says from God's point of view, this is just okay. The first mention of God is actually another verse quoted from 2 Chronicles. But the name for God is changed. Rather than Yahweh, the name for the distinct people of God, the Hebrew term is used for God the Creator, God of Genesis 1. In other words, right at the beginning of Daniel, as Daniel gets taken from his moorings into the worlds very similar to the one that you and I live in, it's written in that God is the creator of it all. That God cares. God cares about what women are doing in India. God cares about the sex trade in London. God cares about the way that Miranda is written, and even apparently about the brewing of beer. He cares about the whole of life. And there's 3 habits that Daniel developed, which I want to suggest are important for us. And of course, the challenges are against that backdrop of how do I live in but not of? How do I live engaged but distinct? Habit number 1. Daniel connected deeply with his world. Daniel connected deeply with his world. He learnt the language and the literature of the Babylonians. You know how they were taught in those days? Daniel would literally have had to write out large tracts of classic Babylonian literature by hand. So he became very familiar with the stories and the writings that shaped and formed Babylonian world. In other words, he didn't just learn pop culture, he learned the presuppositional thinking of this civilization. I want to encourage you to get engaged enough in your world, not just to pick the superficial level of things, but understand why people do things as they do. I guess it's why we've appreciated Oz so much today so far. He took a Babylonian name. Do you know what Belteshazzar means? Its connotations were those of Babylonian gods. He would have learnt the unspoken rules of court life. He would have watched how the king spoke to the courtier. He would have seen how this courtier got his way and this courtier didn't. And he would have understood slowly over time how influence was won and how decisions were made. By the end of Daniel's time there, I suspect that he could navigate his way around court life blindfolded. It was as if he'd become clothed in Babylonian culture. Does that remind you of anyone? Remind you of the way that Jesus came and clothed himself so that people were able to say of Jesus, he is like us. Can I suggest that you and I will never be salt and light or shape our world until others can say of us, he or she is like us. That we have followed the incarnation by being incarnated ourselves into the world. Remember, just like Daniel, for most of us there is a period of apprenticeship. We don't jump in at a high level. The callings that Oz was talking about earlier are often years away. It requires hard work. It requires learning. But not only did Daniel engage with the world, but we're told at the end of Daniel chapter 1 that he was 10 times better. He and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, were 10 times better than all the other young leaders. What does that mean for us? We incarnate, we take on the clothes of our culture, but also suggested here that you and I, if we want to influence, need to become the very best that we can be in our chosen world. Now, helpfully, there's been all sorts of research done recently on how you can be exceptional in your world, how you could be maybe like Daniel, 10 times better. Here's a summary of the research. I noticed the frisson earlier where Oz volunteered 3 points rather than an 800-page book. You notice that? Well, here's 3 points on 3 books. The first is this, that those that are exceptional in whatever field, that there's actually no evidence that it is natural gifting. There's no extra gene that a few people are born with that just makes them outstanding. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with your IQ. The exceptional footballer is not necessarily a budding academic. It's not a result either of being an infant prodigy. Typically, you cannot recognize those who will lead in their fields at the age of 10 or the age of 12. Rather, there's another factor that causes people to be exceptional. Do you know what it is? It's practice. Not just any old practice. Not the sort of practice that I used to do at the piano, when I would watch the clock and stare out of the window whilst playing a few notes. This is deep, very present practice. This is all your senses engaged and turned on. This is practice that constantly asks, how can I do it better? How can I be more effective? What have I just learnt? It's that sort of practice, and it's a huge amount of it. Do you know how much? 10,000 hours is what the research says. 10,000 hours of deep practice typically leads to exceptional performance. Now, you may be interested to know that Daniel had 3 years. And if he'd worked 70 hours a week for 3 years with 4 weeks holiday each year, he'd have got his 10,000 hours in. And given that he was single, maybe he did just that. But the first thing is that we need to incarnate ourselves in our world. I'm going to ask you a question, and this is not a rhetorical question. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. In fact, I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to turn to someone next to you and have a go at answering these questions. Question number 1. What world has the Lord called you to contribute to? Question number 2, what expertise do you need to develop? What world has the Lord called you to contribute to? What expertise might he be asking you to develop? You, ladies and gentlemen, have got 2 minutes to find someone, answer those questions, and hear from someone else. Habit number 2. Daniel connected deeply with God. He connected deeply with God. Remember, of course, he got caught out praying 3 times a day. He'd found a rhythm in his life that meant that he was able to walk with the Lord despite a demanding role in government. Daniel knew that the secret to great success was the strength of his inner world. What were the benefits of Daniel's times of prayer? You know, the first one I think was a benefit, was that Daniel was able to hear what the Lord wanted him to do and do it. And you know that's the basis of being a disciple? A disciple can easily be summed up in these 2 questions. What does the Lord want you to do, and what are you going to do about it? Have you ever noticed how a parent will sometimes address a child? They will say, "You're not listening." And what they mean by that is, "You're not doing what I say." Now, my supposition is this, that the Lord is always speaking to us. Do you think that's the case? But often the case is we're not listening. And often it's a question of simply stilling ourselves. Do you notice the hum of the fridge in the kitchen most days? But when you still yourself, you can hear it. When Jesus is accused of healing on the Sabbath in John's Gospel, do you remember what he says? He says, "My Father is always working." My question to you is, what is the Father doing in your world right now? Who can shape their world for God? Who can do it? I would suggest that none of us can do it. And consequently, it's smart to work out what the Father's doing and do that. And that's why I think Daniel, that was reason number 1 why Daniel prayed. In fact, you see it in Daniel chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar's had a dream. He goes to all his wise men and he says, "I've had a dream. You need to tell me the interpretation, and I'm not telling you what the dream was." You know, the sort of gig you just long for. And you know what they said? One of them says, "O king, what you ask no man can do." Wrong. A disciple can. A disciple goes and prays. Daniel says to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, "Let's pray that the Lord would have mercy on us and we wouldn't die." And then Daniel hears what the Lord says and is able to go to the king. Does it very well, doesn't take glory for himself. "O God, O king, the Lord who I serve has shown me." We hear the voice of the Lord. What is the Lord doing in your world? Secondly, when Daniel prayed, it would have reminded him why he was living as he was living. I think most of us spend too much time asking, "What should I do?" and not, "Why should I do it?" Every day, for many of us here, we'll get up and make a list. Here's what I've got to do today. And the sheer busyness of life means that we get stolen from us the very reason why we're doing it. Who knows, in busy, demanding life, we have to have the why writ large. Otherwise, of course, when the king's table is spread with the best meats and the finest wines, we just help ourselves because we've forgotten why we're doing this. Start to believe our own press. Daniel would have prayed and drawn strength for his times of unpopularity. Do you notice Daniel's career? Moments of elevation and moments of great opposition and persecution or unpopularity. Can I ask you, do you have strength to withstand the heat when things are difficult? That's where we go and we pray and we draw on the Lord. And my encouragement to you is, draw on the Lord in preparation. Don't wait for it to happen. I remember reading one philosopher, he said, "Do you want to die well?" He said, "Prepare to die if you want to die well." I think it's the same for persecution. If you want to suffer well, if you want to stand your ground well, draw the strength from the Lord. And I think Daniel would have gained wisdom to know how to act. Isn't it perplexing, Daniel? He takes the name of a Babylonian god. I think I'd have objected to that. But he said no to the wine and the meat. I'd have had that. I mean, I don't know about you. It would help me. Could the Lord just give us some commandments? Just tell us, do this, 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 and not that, that, that. Who's noticed it doesn't work like that in the grey zone? How much of our lives do we spend in the grey zone? It's why we need to go deeply into the Lord. Paul writes to the Galatians, he says, walk in the Spirit, not according to the law. In other words, the commandments give us a guide, if you like, but they don't help us in the grey zone. There we walk in the Spirit. And as Daniel prayed, not only did he hear from the Lord and get strength from the Lord, but there was something else that happened. He got a gift that nobody else got. There were two things that opened up the world for Daniel. One was his exceptional ability, 10 times better. The other was that he interpreted dreams and visions. It was a gift that was given him from God. I don't think you get that from Babylonian literature. Now, Jesus had things which people used to remark on. They said, where does he get that wisdom? They said, he speaks with an authority that I've never heard before. Now, who would agree? Authority and wisdom are hard to describe, but you know them when you hear them. How did he get them? He got up early each morning and said, Abba, Father. And so I would suggest we need to be the best we can be, but there is often a gift that God will give you which causes you to stand apart from others. Where do you get it? From him. You say, no, David, can't I have a shortcut? There is nowhere else you can get it. If you want it, you have to thirst, hunger, seek, and then he gives. And so the second thing for Daniel was that he engaged with the culture, but secondly, he engaged deeply with God. Another question for you. If you could ask God for any gift, what would it be? What would be the equivalent of a dream or a vision? Or the gift of dreams and visions that God gave Daniel for you? What would it be? We're going to have an opportunity at the end of the day, as we started today with worship, we'll end with worship, we'll have an opportunity to pray. Maybe heaven will give some gifts. What is it for you? Third habit of Daniel's. Daniel connected deeply with other believers. He connected deeply with other believers. Daniel had a few people, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, who shared his world and who shared his life. And I want to suggest that for those of us that know that this everything conference, this bringing God into everything, that we need people, God's people in our world with us who we can connect deeply with. I wonder what Daniel gained from that. What he prayed with them sometimes. And sometimes that's what we need. We need people to pray with. We have situations in our world that others will not understand. We have decisions to be made which others would not understand. So we need others to pray with. We need those that would help us maintain the rhythms of life. Do you know what I mean by the rhythms of life? Work and play. Relationships and achievement. Engaging with culture, engaging with God. My experience is that all of our lives are always a little out of kilter on one of those. And it's not sometimes helpful to have people who don't understand your world telling you how you should work or how you should rest. Who's experienced that one? Find those who understand your world, who can be on mission with you, who can help and support you in those ways. I suspect that those 4 men helped each other stay bold when the heat was on. Do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have gone into the furnace if it had just been one of them? Of course, we don't know. But I know if I was facing something like that, I'd rather face it with others than by myself. They would have asked how God might want to use them. They understood that they could do more together than they can apart. A couple of questions for you to think about. Who could form that team with you? What do you need from them, and what would you contribute to them? A couple of years ago now, the churches in the city of Portland on the Northwest Pacific coast had thought a lot about these 3 principles: engaging with the culture, engaging with God, and engaging with others who you can do mission with. And they sought the Lord in prayer. And as a result, many of the churches in Portland decided there is something that we can do together. They went to the mayor, who was incidentally the first openly gay mayor in America, and asked him this question: how can we serve for the good of this city? No strings attached. After deliberations, the churches launched into a season of service, and within a year there were 450 churches and 28,000 people involved. They started a dozen free medical clinics to serve the uninsured and provided mentoring and support for homeless families. The city of Portland was so impressed that they allowed the churches to begin adopting public schools. Of course, the bias or the dynamic in most Western cities right now is exactly the opposite. It was not that the church had forgotten that they had a message as well. During that time, Louis Palau preached to thousands at one of Portland's major festivals. At a gathering of 500 church leaders, the mayor was recently presented with a gift of $100,000 to help reduce the dropout teenage rate in schools. He said this: "When we first heard the idea, we were skeptical, but our modest hopes were incredibly exceeded by what you and your churches have accomplished. I want to suggest that the hopes and expectations of those around us can also be exceeded if we too will learn those three principles from Daniel's life: engage with your world, engage with your God, and engage with his people." And we're going to watch a short film now of how a community of believers are doing just this in Peckham, in London. When I first suggested to these guys that we should run this film, they said, "No, we don't want to do this." They said, "The film will make us out as heroes," and we're not. We really are just normal people trying to do our best. And I said, perfect. Because I said, I figure that most of us at this conference see ourselves as normal people just trying to do our best, and ask, what does it mean to engage with God, engage with our culture, and engage with others on a mission? Let's have a look at this film now.
Peckham's colourful in every sense of the word. You walk down one street and you can find yourself any mobile phone accessory known to man, a yam and a chicken. You turn around the next corner, you've got a selection of fancy restaurants, gastropubs, and this year Frank's Bar opened up on a top of the multi-storey car park, and Time Out said it was a must-thing do of the summer.
Peckham is a really great place to live. It has a great community spirit. There's a great diversity of people from different countries and different communities.
There are 100 different languages spoke within the kind of area, and I love the fact that it is incredibly ethnic diverse. It's one of the few places that you can go and buy a goat, have your mobile phone unlocked, and buy some plantain all in the same shop.
I've lived in Peckham for just over 3 years. I came here to study painting at the Camberwell College of Art. I decided to stay in Peckham because I just grew to love it because I've been here for so long, and I pray for it, and that makes you love it.
We chose to move to Peckham because there were already a few couples from church here, and we really wanted a community where we could get stuck in.
There's now quite a group of us who've come to live in this area for all sorts of different reasons, and have found a really strong community here and found a place that we really care about. We want to invest in, not just take from, not just to be consumers. We actually want to serve the community and get involved and give something back.
I think it's really important that Christians base themselves and root themselves in a community. I moved here about 8 years ago, and my fiancée is now going to be moving here as well when we get married, and our plans are to stay long term in the area. As a result, we've bought a house. We've also got a space which we've rented out for a local business to run a bike shop in. And I think it's really important that people stay in an area and focus on what they can do locally.
I think there's a real unity among the people because everyone understands that it's not really a great area and a lot of bad things have happened. to just try and work together to make it a better place.
There's quite a lot of poverty in Peckham, often hidden poverty. There's also high rates of unemployment, and that's particularly a problem with young people.
And we believe that God really wants to transform Peckham for the better. We can see Peckham in 10 years' time being a vibrant community where poverty is just eradicated, where the schools don't have the reputations they have now, where there's the art scene continues to flourish and people are just connected and living in good community with one another. That's our heart for Peckham.
I think it would be amazing to see outbreaks of the Holy Spirit in cafes. I think it would be amazing that a place that was so well known for knife crime and gun crime and racial violence, everybody would come along side by side and would love each other and would love Jesus.
Quite early on, when we moved here, I became a governor of a local school, and I see that as enabling me to shape education in the local area and shape the lives and the futures of local children.
I'm involved in youth offending teams. I'm a mentor. I help them to learn from their mistakes and to move on from it. It's fulfilling to be able to see the changes and the impact made in those youngsters.
One thing that we as a community are doing is mentoring young people from the academy at Peckham.
It's a 6-week piloting program. Involved teaching some of the guys here that were struggling with their GCSE maths and English. Gave it our best shot to try and help them out before their exams.
I think 95% of the kids who were predicted to fail actually ended up passing either their maths or English GCSE. It's now been rolled out into 10 schools across London with a view to sort of going national in 2 to 3 years. I think if you have Jesus at the centre and you want to be involved because you want to love people and you want to show to people that He is the way, it becomes something that is not tiring, and actually it gives you energy and it gives you hope as well as other people hope.
You don't have to start big. You can just start by finding out your neighbours' names or finding out the name of the guy that sells the big issue at the end of your street. It's not about having some sort of grand plan. You can just start one person at a time.